having the ability to tailor our professional learning calendar to what our specific needs are has been a game changer. I love being able to see what our schools need and saying, yeah, we can do that.
Welcome to IB Matters, a podcast for those interested in learning more about IB education. We interview teachers, students, and educational leaders around the world to learn how the International Baccalaureate Framework of Education has improved their practice and how you can use it to improve education in your school. Hi, folks. Welcome back to IB Matters. And I'm here with a good friend and a local legend, Casey Strecker, who is a leader in the Minneapolis public schools system, particularly working with IB. And he and I have been working very closely together, especially the last year or so. And I'm going to let Casey kind of tell you a little bit about himself and about Minneapolis Public Schools, sometimes known as MPS. If you're familiar with the United States, if you're familiar with Minnesota, you know Minneapolis is the largest city and one of the largest school districts, and definitely the largest one in terms of an IB presence. So welcome to the podcast, Casey. And why don't you just let folks know a little bit about you and what you do there in MPS?
Thanks so much, John. I appreciate that intro. I'm Casey Strecker. I am the IB content lead for Minneapolis Public Schools. I stepped into this role after being a longtime middle years program coordinator at one of our local middle schools. And it's been a great way for me to see how the program starts at the PYP and goes all the way through our DP and CP offerings. Minneapolis, like you said, is the largest city in the state, and it is the second largest school district in the state. We currently have 15 schools that have IB in them, 3 elementary schools, 7 middle schools, and 5 high schools. When you break that down, that's approximately 11,000 students that get to experience IB at some point in their pathway with Minneapolis, and nearly 1,000 teachers. So we have had a really great program that has started way back in the day with Ann Watton Middle School and Southwest High School, some of our old school stalwarts, and have slowly grown to the numbers that we have today.
Yeah, one of the things that, the reason we're talking today is because, you've made a commitment in the last few years to create MYP schools in all of your middle schools. That brings on, issues of its own when you're trying to get authorized and so on. Even though you have some institutional experience, you have whole schools that really never knew much about, and their staffs never knew much about IB. And so kind of what's been going on with that lately?
A few years ago, we had a complete district transformation, comprehensive district design. It was a whole redesign that happened. And in that process, we identified that to strengthen our curriculum and to ensure that students, regardless of their zip code in our city, would have access to high quality, rigorous education. And when we looked at the schools that we currently had and schools that had really great programs in place, it was our IB schools. So the school board of the district made a decision that we were going to move forward with a plurality of our middle schools becoming IB schools. We have 2 candidate schools right now that are very close to becoming authorized. And so we will continue to push forward and say that, hey, MPS and IB are hand in hand together.
Yeah. And again, as I alluded to, the one thing that when I talked to you, I wanted to talk about was about the means by which we got so many people trained. And I say we because you and I have worked closely together. And I'm a former IB coordinator myself with MYP and DP. And I know the struggles that I had, working in one school, pretty good sized school, but when we, added the MYP and we needed to get representation and all the departments going to training, our only option was to send people away. And, the budget is big for that. Back in those days, this is 15, 20 years ago. Even then, it cost $1,500 to $2,000 to send someone away to training. By the time you paid for hotels and flights and subs back home, it got to be really expensive. And we've got IB has actually made this easier for schools. And those of you that are listening to us from all over the world have the same opportunity that we've employed with MPS. And why don't you tell us a little bit, kind of a thumbnail sketch, what it is you've been doing, Casey?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, it is really expensive to send folks to training. And Minneapolis used to be a hub for IB training. But in recent years, they've decided to kind of split with us and Indianapolis, Indiana, hosting official trainings here. And those are starting off $744.
Hmm.
And if you have multiple subject areas that need to get folks trained, new subject guides get put out, it can be quite the hefty bill. So we've gone to the new model that IB has offered, where we are able to request school-based trainings at a much smaller price point to really help our schools get the trainings they need and provide the flexibility to say, hey, we may not be offering a Cat 2 design training this year at the official conference, but it's a need that we have, but we're able to do it. So through our partnership with MNIB, we've been able to find out what training needs are required throughout our entire association. So we've been able to host trainings for Lang and Lit, design, arts, managing assessments. We've identified the needs that we had and be able to put in requests to IB for them to send a trainer to us, have it all locally hosted, have local teachers, local administrators, local IB teachers come and join us and really have some great learning experiences. And it's almost at the drop of a hat. When we know that we need to have a training, we can put that request into IB, and within a matter of weeks, we can have that trainer come out, provide that training for us, and we get what we need.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this is something, when to me it was a bit of a black box that someone else had unlocked. If you go back 3 years ago, I wasn't involved. And for those of you that aren't aware of what I do, I'm the director of Minnesota's Association of IB Schools. So I work with all 60 plus schools in Minnesota that run, close to 80 programs. And so I would hear about these school-based workshops, and an individual coordinator would be an expert. There's someone who would tell me, "Oh yeah, I just organized one of these." I go, "Oh, that's interesting. I don't know much about it." And then last year, in the summer at the IB Global Conference, the associations get together every year at that conference, and they shared with us, IB shared with us, that they are welcoming us to get involved as an association. And so that's kind of what's been different. And in fact, the reason Casey and I work so closely together is that it's often Minneapolis schools that are sending or requiring a specific training. So if you're listening to this and you're an association leader, this is a role that for me personally has become a big part of my job in the last 14 months or so. But if you're an individual in a school, and you need specific training, what Casey just said still stands. That is, if you have a particular training for your staff you want to do, go for it. And we're going to try to give you the tools, or at least give you some ideas about how we've used it. And I'll put links in the podcast notes so that you can quickly go find them. For example, what does the catalog look like right now? This is 2025. And so I'll put a link into the current catalog, but you can always go find the catalog online at ibo.org. So Casey, why don't you walk us through a little bit of nuts and bolts? Teachers come to you and they say, hey, or you're the coordinator in a building and you go, hey, we need a MYP design workshop, category 1, or a assessment workshop, category 3. What's the next step?
Once you identify the training that you need, you go to IB and you go on the IB website, you go to the professional development link. There is a spot for you to say, request a workshop. And it's a really simple form that you're able to fill out where you're able to walk through and say like, hey, this is what we would like to offer. You need to have at least 7 people be able to register for it to be a go. But if you've got those 7 people, you fill out the form, you say what schools are going to be a part of it, what sections you would like to offer. You would say what hotels are available for the workshop leader to stay at, who is that point of person going to be for billing contact, and you submit that to IB, and within a couple days, they send you back another form that you've signed off and say, yeah, we're good to go, and start getting folks registered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when it comes to things like, Casey's exactly right. You need to know your nearest airport, things like that. And you suggest hotels that might be good or close to the venue, but you don't have to make those arrangements, do you, Casey?
No, it takes care of it all for you, which is super nice. You give them the suggestions. Ideally, you want to pick a spot that is pretty close to where you're having your workshop, just for transportation purposes, because you are on the hook to make sure that the workshop leader gets to and from the locale each day. Mm-hmm. But you give those suggestions on that form, and IB takes care of the rest. It's pretty slick. Mm-hmm. So as an association, what we've done is started the conversation, hey, we know these trainings are going to be needed. We're going to need people to get trained in different subject areas. Let's start a bank of needs. Figure out going through a 3-year cycle, if you will, about what we are offering. And so for MNIB, this past year, we've offered, it looks to be 10 or so different
Mhm.
workshops,
Yeah.
everything from Pedeschool, Cat 1, all the way to Cat 3, Leaders of Learning, Managing Assessments. And we're just going to go through a rotation of them over the course of the next few years to ensure that schools have easy opportunities for teachers and administrators to get the official IB training that they need.
Yeah.
This works for PYP as well. If you have a ton of folks who need to get making the PYP happen occur, you guys can get them signed up. Same thing for some of the ones that are a little bit harder.
That was one of the frustrations you mentioned earlier about the fact that we used to host, we were a hub for IB training here in Minneapolis. In fact, downtown at the Hilton, every March or so, I could count on, 400 people coming to town from all over to take trainings here. And we would look at and target those. Okay, that's the time that we can send. What are they offering? We'd look at the offerings, and then there'd inevitably be frustration because it's like, wait, we really need this. And then we would put a request into IB, and they were on a longer cycle than we needed. And so folks were forced to send people away. So by doing it this way, for example, we're speaking here in May of 25. In the last 3 weeks, I have hosted a trainer 3 weeks ago from Brazil to do Phaidon Health, a trainer 2 weeks ago from Vancouver, British Columbia to do design, and just earlier this week, a trainer from Detroit to help us with the arts. And what a fun time it is for me, because as the kind of the local host, I'm responsible for getting them to and from the venue. So I pick them up at their hotel. I have the treats with me. I have the various materials with me for the like the poster board and the markers and all the kind of things you need for a workshop. But I have these great conversations with people about what they do and what their school's like, even get into like what did they do for fun in Minneapolis last night, those kind of things. But it's really fun to get to know the trainers. And then if you really, if they work out well, which all of them have so far, you can invite them back or you can request them. So like if we were to repeat that design training next year, I'd say, let me have this guy, and or that woman. And so you have a lot of flexibility. They do ask that you make the request at least 12 weeks in advance of when you want to host it. And that's, it's just kind of up to you to do some planning. You can't show, understandably, they have to find someone to do the training, arrange travel, and kind of do all the nuts and bolts things that IB has to do to create an opportunity for us. But it's really been great.
To your point, though, about just how easy it is to set up. One of the best things about it as well is that we can really tailor these workshops to the audience that we have here in Minneapolis or in Minnesota. We are able to say, hey, we need a design training right now, and here's where our schools are currently at. Can you take the official IB materials and make them fit for the crew that's going to be in the space? It creates for really hyper personalized learning. For one thing, in Minnesota, we don't do e-assessment. So I've been able to have conversations with folks before they come, the workshop leaders, have conversations with the workshop leaders and say, hey, can you put a particular emphasis on assessments, looking at rubrics, instead of putting a particular emphasis on e-assessment, because it's not something we do here. The workshop leaders have really appreciated knowing who their audience is, so that they are able to present the workshop in something that is more meaningful to the folks that are in the room. Sometimes when you sign up for some of the larger IB conferences, you're pulling people from all over the world, which is great. You get an expanded petri dish. However, it may not necessarily be tailored to the specific needs of the folks in the space. And these school-based requests have really allowed us to be able to do that.
Yeah. And, because Minneapolis has needed, so many people trained in such a relatively short time period, what you just described is particularly helpful, because oftentimes they're working, maybe you've got 2 or 3 schools represented, but they might all be from your district. Or, recently we had a handful of students or teachers in the group, and we had all Minneapolis and St. Paul teachers. One of the things about using an association's ability in this case is that some of these trainings, you'd have a hard time. Like if you're listening to us and you're a coordinator in one school, you don't have 7 design teachers, and you're just not going to be able to fill that out. But you can invite, even if you're in an individual school, you can invite other local IB schools to send people, and hopefully together you can put together a request that you think you'll be able to fill with at least 7, and they take up to 25. And if you have something extraordinary, you can repeat it. For example, we did two Lang and Litz a month apart last fall. It's something you can do. Let's talk a little bit about the summer conference coming up, Casey. Why don't you? I'll fill in, but why don't you kind of tell them what we do for a summer conference?
So summer conference is really great for us here as a kickoff to the school year. We've been doing this for a number of years with MNIB, and teachers get together. We offer trainings hosted by our MNIB members, things like Intro to MYP or how to make AI be effective in your classroom. Real topics that are meaningful to our folks at our from our association, but we're also being able to, with this new request system, be able to offer official IB trainings as well. So we are going to be offering that Cat 3 managing assessments training again, just another one that we saw that we had a lot of interest in, and hopefully get more people to be able to get that learning from that workshop.
Right.
We're also going to be offering some CP and DP trainings as well, things that are harder to find. They're not offered as often across the wide network of workshops. So by us being able to request them, we know that our teachers in the association, in the area, are going to be able to get the training that they need.
Yeah, I'd love the fact that we have the kind of the two layers we have, and it so happens the venue we're using, the middle school we're using, has two floors in the main wing. And we'd put all the IB trainings up on the second floor, and they're all next to each other, and we kind of have their, group on the same schedule. And then on the first floor, we run our locally hosted trainings, which are mostly 1 day. And so we have a real variety of 1 day and 2 day things. And this is a good time to bring up the fact that the type of IB training we've landed on. Think about this, folks. If you've been to IB training, which I'm sure a lot of listeners have been, you typically go for 2.5 days. They're, day one, day two, and then you're done at noon on day three. We did that for a while, but what we've landed on that works out more practically when it comes down to, getting subs and not having to go on a Saturday morning, that kind of thing, is we've taken on the blended model. And the blended model is essentially you have 12 hours of direct instruction over 2 days, just like the same 2 days you'd have on the first 2 days of a traditional IB training. So instead of having the third day where you come back for a half day, they have an assignment which is designated as possibly taking 3 hours. They generally don't take 3 hours to complete, but it's due within 7 days of the second day of the training. In other words, if you have a Monday, Tuesday blended workshop, by the following Tuesday, you need to have turned in this assignment. So essentially, it cuts out one more day of showing up for this. And what I've noticed in practical application is that most of the presenters are getting you started on that roughly 3 hour assignment while you're still in the second day of training. And so you have a good head start. What a lot of teachers do is if they're there with a schoolmate, a staff member that they work with, they go back to their own school, and sometime over the next few days, they just set aside a couple hours to get together and knock off that assignment. And it's a very easy way to do it. It makes it logistically so much simpler for us as an association or you as a school to be done in 2 days. Obviously the registrants still have more work to do, but it's not a lot of work and it's just more practical. So I'd highly recommend the blended model for people that are thinking about this.
Yeah, John, you're absolutely right with that. The flexibility that the blended model has offered us as an association is amazing. We're able to offer these trainings on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and folks are able to be back at their classrooms for Mondays and Fridays. They're not having to spend time away on the weekends going to training. It's all within their normal workday, and folks have really appreciated that, coordinators and teachers alike. I look back at the original trainings that we requested at the start of the year where we had 3 days, and it folks did start to dwindle on those half days on Saturdays. We would always offer them on Thursday, Friday, and then into Saturday. And those Saturdays the attendance did tend to be a little lower. So we knew that we had to fix something. And this blended model has given us the perfect solution to that issue.
Yeah. And so when you look at kind of setting one of these things up for you, the logistics, the nuts and bolts of how to do it. And I checked in with the IB staff, and this is something offered around the world. So I know our listeners are spread all over. And so if you're in the Asia Pacific region or the Europe, Middle East area, you have this opportunity in your local IB office to go through the request system. I'm sure, things vary a little bit from place to place, but this infrastructure, I've been assured, is available to those of you no matter where you are. There are a couple things that, like I mentioned, we're responsible for transportation to and from the venue from the hotel, but we're not responsible for airport to hotel or at the end getting them back to the airport. They do that. IB pays for them to use a ride service or a taxi or whatever as they wish. We do the meals. Our school our association provides the treats in the morning. We have coffee, tea, and that ready. In the morning, we have boxed lunches that are provided for lunch so people don't have to leave. But you can do it differently. You can offer time for them to go and do it outside. You're responsible for the presenter's meal for sure. And so you can figure out how you want to do that. One of the things, just nuts and bolts, is talk money a little bit. You mentioned, Casey, the 744 for that's the baseline training for a regular 2.5 day training. This costs a school $350 for the training. So the IB has allowed associations to charge up to $100 on top of that $350 if they're providing meals. And so that's what we do here in Minnesota. Essentially, people register with me. I sign them up with the IB officially, and then charge $450, which is the $350 for the money that goes directly to IB to pay for this training, and then $100 per student or registrant goes to our association. That covers the lunches, the breakfast, the extra transportation, other logistics that we deal with, materials and things that we gather and keep in stock for everyone. And it seems to be a pretty fair deal. Allows us a little bit of cash flow to kind of operate this system, and helps with taking care of anything else that comes up when it comes to operating this. So I'd recommend, if you are an association, to have a surcharge of some amount. $50 is allowed if you're not serving food, and $100 is allowed if you are. So you can hear, from the numbers we've been talking about, that it's definitely more financially feasible for schools to send, 5 teachers. If you think about that, now I mentioned earlier that it used to cost $1,500 to $2,000 to send someone away. I think it's pretty much $2,000 to $2,500 now to send someone away here in the U.S. to a training with all the expenses of travel and hotels and things, especially when they're offered in big cities, and hotels cost, sometimes $300 a night. And so by having this in town, you can, do this quite a bit more cheaply, and probably send 5 teachers for the price of one to a training like this.
When it comes down to it, sending folks to Tahoe or Vancouver from Minneapolis, it makes things feel pretty special. However, with budget constraints that our districts are currently facing right now, this is providing a much more affordable and reasonable way to get folks the training that they need and deserve to be true IB teachers. So we've really grabbed onto this model and said, this is something that we can do moving forward. One of the things you do miss out on is that the petri dish of folks who are in the training is a lot smaller. You're pulling people from your local metro area, so you may not get some of the statewide or countrywide connections that you have. Like, I have an IB math teacher here from Seattle meeting with our Minneapolis one. But I feel like some of the conversations can be much more hyper local and go deeper into our current truth, our current situation. So we're not getting pulled in a million different directions.
It's not perfect. Like you said, some people like myself, I absolutely loved my experience having been a teacher already for over 25 years. When I started in IB 20 years ago, I loved the fact that I got sent to Seattle, or I got sent to Vancouver or Chicago or Toronto, whatever, for training. Those are wonderful days. I just loved it because it's something that a teacher basically never gets. And so it was cool to do that, and you lose that part. And I personally love that. But as a coordinator, I ran into teachers all the time for various reasons. Some just thought it was too much bother to travel. Others had families and family obligations that made it difficult. And so, there's trade-offs for sure. But in terms of the big picture, I think it's allowed us to get a lot more people trained. And I think in the end, for schools, it's a more efficient way to get your staff up to speed. And really, it's all about helping your school become a stronger IB school, whether it's MYP, PYP, DP, or CP, you've got the opportunity to really tailor the training to what you need and what your school, has planned for the future, and it happens more quickly with less budget. So one more thing about the summer training is that our summer training is that we created essentially a cluster of official IB workshops. Now, if you get a cluster big enough, IB actually sends along a site manager who is another IB Educator Network teacher or leader who then watches the trainers. Essentially, they sit in on the trainers, and I think if there's 5 or more going on simultaneously, they'll send a site supervisor. That person actually becomes your right-hand person. If you're leading it, like a person in my position, I would have another person there with me. Because when we've done it, we've never had 5 simultaneously. We haven't had a site manager, but that would be the next step. So our summer conference, if it gets big enough, could actually have a site manager. So if you want, essentially you run it like a little mini IB hub. That's an additional layer to this whole thing if you get enough of them. We've been mostly running, 1, 2, or sometimes 3. This year we'll have 4 at our summer conference at the same time.
Yes, the workshop leaders have been kind of surprised to hear that they're the only person
Yeah.
delivering a workshop, and they feel like they're a bit of a rock star. Like, when you pulled me in just to do this, it helps so much. Like, we could just say, like, we're going to offer our arts training this week and have our arts teachers be able to be out of the building. We'll have enough subs. And then the next week, offer design. That way, we could spread that workload of getting substitute teachers into our buildings and make sure that schools feel like it's actually feasible for them to have teachers out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing too, I'll give you some props too, Casey, is that Casey sometimes he's registered for these directly himself because of his role in MPS, but sometimes he essentially just comes in and audits, and what he's showing is like last week for arts, he came in and because they were starting to show they're given permission for the first time, the trainer was given permission to talk about the MYP beta launch directly in a training. He wanted to check in and kind of hear that from the first person from the trainer. And, Casey is a regular drop-in where he comes in and he gives some support to his local teachers and kind of hears what their concerns are and gets context for what they're learning. And he comes and goes as it allows him to do. But it's another way for if you're a district leader or a curriculum director, or if you kind of want to learn more about these things, you can sign yourself up, or you can do what Casey often does, which is audit parts of it, so you can kind of get the picture. And just in any good leader supporting their teachers in the role that they are learning, because they're under some duress sometimes, because they're like, wait, I'm learning new things, and so you can kind of take some of the questions that they have, in person as it happens. So I wanted to give you some support for what you're doing in that way too, Casey.
Sure, that Johnny. It's been great to be able to sit in on those conversations and hear what the teachers are learning. Also, we've been able to invite our IB coordinators from Minneapolis, if they have enough release time, to stop in at those trainings. Because they're local, they can be there and have those conversations, those in the moment learning conversations with the teachers that they're sending. And it creates a real powerful connection. Because the price point is where it's at as well, we are able to get more leaders involved. In Minneapolis, we have various content leads for social studies, arts, music, that have been able to go to these trainings as well, so that they can have the knowledge base. So when they're coaching teachers or making curricular decisions, they've got IB in the background as well.
Yeah, and I think there's even the intangibles, the fact that they've been trained. Sometimes leads have, because your district's so big, the leads maybe have never taught in an IB context. And so they maybe don't know some of these things and why they're important. And they can start to see, what those of you listening know is the magic sauce of IB, so when they kind of start, you kind of bring them along and you go, did you see how IB does this? That's why we like it so much. And those are the kind of things that you can't, afford to send someone for 2,500 to hope they get that idea. But in this operation, in this system, it really works for spreading the word out. So I agree with you. I think that's a really good way that you guys have done it. All right. Well, thanks, Casey, for coming on with me. This is fun. We've been talking about doing this for a little while, and I thought, well, here's the time. We were just with each other 3 weeks in a row with trainings, and I was thinking, let's get this done. So any final thoughts, any Anything you want to share to people or with people about how they could get started with this, or how they, what the advantages of doing this method are?
Yeah, as a longtime coordinator, it was something that was always at the back of my mind of like, how am I going to get folks trained? And every year going on to the IB website and looking at that Minneapolis training and saying, oh my gosh, please, 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 please make sure that this Cat 2 is going to be there, or Cat 3, because I've already sent a teacher in the previous 5 years to Cat 1 and I can't have them repeat it again. Having the ability to tailor our professional learning calendar to what our specific needs are has been a game changer. I love being able to see what our schools need and saying, yeah, we can do that. If we get enough people signed up, we can get this specific training here. And you can see the weight of that decision and keeping track of all that on a coordinator's shoulders just be lifted. And they feel great about it, and knowing that their teachers are getting the learning that they need and deserve to be the best IB teachers that they can be.
Well, that's very well said. Thank you, Casey. I appreciate you coming on and sharing this with everybody. And I think your role is a perfect one for this kind of thing. But a lot of coordinators and teachers are maybe working more alone, or working by themselves, and are looking for these kinds of solutions. And I'm hoping that this conversation will help them with that. Be sure, if you're listening to and you're interested in more of this, check with your local associations or your regional representatives from IB for how to proceed in your own area. But we'll have lots of links in our podcast notes, including the course catalog, the IB training catalog as it's available, and then any links that we can share that should help you out. So take a look at that. And again, thank you, Casey, for coming on with us and sharing this information.
Sounds good, John. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. Please check out the podcast notes for links about this episode and links to learn more about the IB Pre-K to 12th grade continuum of education. There's also a link in the notes to directly text us with comments, suggestions, or to let us know that you would like to appear on future episodes of IB Matters. We now have over 130 IB Matters episodes covering a wide range of subjects. To help you find topics of interest to you, use our podcast webpage linked in the notes. Find all our episodes wherever you get your podcasts and hit subscribe so you don't miss any future programs. Join our over 4,000 followers on Twitter, now known as X, at MattersIB. Also help us spread the word about IB by liking, sharing, and reviewing the IB Matters links in your own feeds and social networks. In our time on the air, we've been heard in 180 countries, a testament to the global reach of the IB.